My obsession is to investigate and find missing victims. I think that there is value in doing that, especially as we move this case along that no one else is looking into. Israel Keyes said, "I'm a serial killer who's traveled the country for the last 12 years, and I killed over 50 people." He would travel the country and hide kits full of weapons, rape tools, sometimes costumes. He's known as the most meticulous serial killer who would plan crimes years in advance. This is about Keyes and his victims and their families.
Yeah, I have articles.
What's been really important to me is taking trips to places Keyes went to look into potential victims. If we can get people interested in this case and get more information out there, we're likely to get more information back, which could help us identify victims. Maybe I can find something the FBI couldn't. In an unreleased interview, the FBI reported that his victims ranged in age from late teens to the elderly. Now, there's a few things to note. My name is Josh Hallmark. I produce a podcast called True Crime Bullshit. I've returned to the tapes and files to reassess the period. In 2012, I was living in Seattle writing advertising materials for nonprofit healthcare insurance. I quickly found a coworker who was also a big consumer of true crime media and was fascinated with crime. And so we would have our weird little water cooler talks about crimes that were interesting or scary or, devastating. And one day she kind of peeked over the cubicle wall and was like, "Hey, there's this new serial killer. Have you heard about this guy?" And so that piqued my interest immediately. It was like, oh, there's a modern-day serial killer? So we started looking at the Samantha Koenig case. Samantha Koenig was a barista living in Anchorage, Alaska. She was working at a drive-through coffee stand. Was closing up one night in early 2012. A man came by, ordered a coffee. He crawled through the window and abducted her. The first ransom request texted the family to go to a park and go to the bulletin board there, and underneath a missing dog poster was a typed ransom letter. From there, they started, negotiating how the ransom would be paid via text messages between Samantha's phone and her father. He wants $30,000. In the meantime, the suspect's testing out Samantha's debit card to see how much money is already on it. That's what got him busted. They were able to follow the tracks of these debit transactions. Then they caught his rental car on camera, and that was it.
This is a family came down for a wedding.
His name was Israel Keyes. Keyes was arrested in Texas, March 13th, 2012.
Is there a reason you told them?
Well, I was going to tell you that, but we're investigating the kidnapping.
Okay.
Play that knife right there.
Oh, sure.
They found a litany of suspicious items in his rental car. Women's clothing. They found large amounts of cash, tons of weapons in the trunk of his car.
Like I say, I would have preferred to wait until they find the bodies in Vermont, which sounds like
A lot of the Keyes interrogations had somehow made their way to YouTube.
My concern at this point is not knowing, like I say, how current things are going to pan out. The information that I still have could come in handy.
I was fascinated by him. I think he felt like he was running game. He had been arrested, but he was in control.
And like I said, I don't want to give out everything all at once, but...
Keyes named 3 victims. Bill and Lorraine Courier, and Samantha Koenig. Keyes confessed he raped and killed Samantha in the shed in his driveway. He dismembered her, took her remains out to Matanuska Lake, about 40 miles north of Anchorage, and set up an ice fishing tent and slowly and methodically submerged her remains in the lake. And then he went home and fed his family the fish that he caught while he was out there. About 6 months before Samantha Keyes rented a car in cash, drove that car to Vermont, abducted 2 people from their home, Bill and Lorraine Currier, raped and murdered them. Their remains had been abandoned in a farmhouse. Keyes said, "I'm a serial killer who's traveled the country for the last 12 years. I've killed over 50 people." There is something excruciatingly terrifying about 50 victims. He's known as the most meticulous serial killer who would plan crimes years in advance and travel great distances. He was in almost every state while he was operating.
I was near the edge, but 30 feet out from the bank on that lake, it drops down to 50, 60 feet already, and I was...
My partner literally eventually started sleeping in the living room because I kind of turned our bedroom into like a war room.
I had her in the front seat, and...
I was just all day long listening to Israel Keyes talk about murdering people.
You have that computer. You wouldn't be giving anything away.
The bosses above us, though, don't know what's on that computer. Jeff and I know what's
The FBI seized his girlfriend's computer as well as his computer. And while they were running data analysis, they found thousands of images. They ran those images through NamUs, which is a government organization for missing people, using facial recognition. And NamUs found 45 matches. Of those 45, the Curriers were 2, as well as other victims I would investigate later. 9 months after he was arrested, he got a hold of a razor blade, and he slit his wrists and then used a bed sheet to hang himself in his cell. He was found several hours later, dead. They find a note, which is actually drenched in blood. 4 pages of freestyle writing. It looked like song lyrics from death metal bands he liked. It was kind of a manifesto. They found this drawing in his own blood of 12 skulls, and then it scrawled underneath it as "We are all one." The FBI believed these skulls represented Keyes and his victims. So it's reasonable to assume that Keyes had killed at least 11, probably more.
If I'm dead, then the investigation from the federal government's point of view is pretty much closed.
Many of the FBI agents who were investigating this case didn't want to give it up, but because of resources and because Keyes was no longer with us, they had to. It was narratively so different from what we're accustomed to, which is like crime, victim, killer. And here it was like killer, crime, victims? I realized here we have this killer who no one's looking into, and at least 8 victims who have never been identified. And that's where like interest became obsession. When I was growing up, I was always kind of an oddly curious kid.
His remains would be found buried here.
Even like as a weirdo little kid, I was looking into serial killers and missing persons cases. And then we had a family tragedy. My second cousins, they were about my age. There was a break-in at their home. A man kicked down the door, and the older of the 2 boys, who was, I think, 7, was running to call 911, and the man shot him in the stomach. And then he found the younger, Daniel, and he led him into the bedroom where their mother was hiding, and he shot them both in the head. Billy, who was shot in the stomach, survived. Like, it hit home in a really real way. I really started at 12 years old evaluating my relationship with true crime. I think because I have an understanding of how grief and trauma affect people, it really struck a nerve with me. There was all these families who don't have answers, and the answers are with this guy who just killed himself. What's been really important to me is to look into potential victims. Producing this podcast, I can share this research, and the further we do it and the further more people get involved, we learn more. So here I am, over 10 years later, doing everything I can to find answers if they're there. Taking trips to places Keyes went could be critical in the investigation into Keyes. There's nothing that is going to stop me from going out and further investigating it.
He had researched and read other serial killers. Israel Keyes didn't kidnap and kill people because he was crazy. Israel Keyes did this because he got an immense amount of enjoyment out of it.
I'd consumed enough true crime that I knew about the Freedom of Information Act requests. So I filed one of those with the FBI. And then the files came. I was not anticipating over 4,000 pages. I start going through the files and the interviews, and the FBI has created a pretty substantial timeline. I can see where Keyes has traveled to. It's great, it's helpful, because there's a lot of components linking Keyes to potential victims. So first is like places he returned to over and over and over again, which is critical in his MO. It shows intent. Keyes had told the FBI every time he was out in the woods or any time he was out driving around, he would look for places that he could abduct people to or abduct people from. And then he would go back and wait in the woods for the right opportunity and the right person. So we should be looking for bodies near roads that he would have taken. Who went missing nearby? Can we place him in the area at the time? And I'm like, okay, add it to the timeline. And it's essentially the timeline of his entire life. I did a bunch of research. I talked to experts.
Investigators say Israel Keyes told authorities he's strategically hid a box filled with weapons and tools near the Winooski River.
Keyes quickly became known for his kill kits. He would travel the country and bury or hide kits, usually buckets, full of weapons, rape tools, sometimes costumes. Keyes talked about hiking there, thinking about burying a kill kit there. He had gone out there looking for victims. So.
And it's right off the road, so when you're driving through, you would see it and be like, oh, maybe I'll stop there.
It's a tourist destination. It seems like a really easy place to bury a body and have nobody question it.
It's heavy stuff to do on your own. And I was, in the first 2 years, working 68 to 80 hours a week on this by myself with no one really to turn to.
I think it was because they were doing construction, right? Is that what you figured out?
They had done construction since she was... I was never looking for a team. It happened very organically. There was no way I was inviting someone into this thing that I cared so much about, that I'd already poured years of my life into.
Episode a couple weeks ago.
3 people weaseled their way in, and now I don't know what I'd do without them.
I have no idea how I feel.
As an investigative journalist, one thing that we can do that the police can't always do is we have the time to kind of follow the rabbit holes that we want to follow.
But isn't that
I want to say certainty doesn't exist without forensic evidence. And I am not there yet, and I don't know that I will ever have the tools to be there. So unfortunately, at this point, it's me hopefully inspiring people who do have the tools to do the work. What's been really important to me is taking trips to places Keyes went to look into potential victims. What I can do in the field is see things that a computer can never show me. Being on the ground, you have a better understanding of the culture of an environment. And also, would someone like Israel Keyes blend in here, or would he stick out? Southern California is what I call a hot spot. It's these places we can put Keyes in over and over and over again. So this trip, I'm going down because there's a missing persons case out of Riverside County that I believe could be a Keyes case. We've done as much as we can online. Now I'd actually like to go see the terrain myself.
California is critical because Keyes' girlfriend did a lot of work down here. I know for a fact he came down to Riverside or to this general area at least twice to visit her while she was working. There's a gentleman who disappeared from Riverside at a time where we can't place Keyes anywhere.
Donald Tobin, he's an older gay man who was living in Riverside, decided to go take some stuff to storage one day, and he was never seen again. Donald Tobin was last seen July 7th of 2010. His car was found about a mile from his house, and all the stuff he was going to take to storage was still in it. It was found in a place he would never go. It's a dog park near the freeway. And that was it. No one could explain what happened. We've also got Keyes' online search records looking for someone who disappeared in Riverside County that week when Donald Tobin disappeared. We looked at the timeline, and it's very tight, but Keyes was unaccounted for in about 20 hours surrounding Donald's disappearance. And as we got further into the investigation, we realized there was a very good likelihood that Keyes was trolling gay men online. Donald was gay. Keyes, he never came out of the closet socially, but he was bisexual and sexually motivated.
I hope I can find how easy it is to stay concealed there and how easy it is to get from where the car was found to this gentleman's house without being seen. Something that will either make it seem more certain that it was Keyes or rule Keyes out. We are at Carlson Dog Park. This is where Donald Tobin's car was found. It's a couple miles from his house in Riverside. Then from here, we'll do a quick hike of this trail at Mount Rubidoux, get a lay of the land, see other places to hide. So you can see up here, there's houses just over here to the right. That's the neighborhood Tobin lived in. He lived walking distance less than a mile from where we are now. And again, this trail goes basically right into his backyard. I think it's about a block from his house where he was last seen.
Keyes talked extensively in his interviews about stalking trailheads and using trailheads.
The other thing that stands out is there's this cross up there.
Keyes' mother was a big fan of extremist religions. They were in a fundamentalist Christian church outside of Spokane, Washington. He's raised essentially off the grid. He was not introduced to culture, other people, humanity, and was surrounded by people who didn't value human life, who openly hated gay people and black people and brown people, and I mean, imagine what that fosters.
Keyes talked a lot about his animosity towards organized religion, seeing the cross up on the hill. He talked about wanting to kill people at religious sites and churches. What most likely would have occurred is Keyes broke into Donald Tobin's house and then abducted him in his own car, took him to a second location where he presumably would have sexually assaulted and then murdered him, took him to a third location to bury him, and then parked his car here. And Keyes could have easily from here walked back to wherever his car was without ever having been seen. Keyes wanted to create distance from his crimes as quickly as possible. It's very easy for someone to get from here back onto the freeway in a short period of time.
So if you look at the big picture, you've got a trailhead. You've got an environment Keyes is in frequently, and it's very compelling. I think it warrants further investigation into the potential that Keyes was involved in Donald Tobin's disappearance. I published all of this information as ethically as possible in the podcast and immediately put it out into the world. If we can get people interested in this case and get more information out there, we're likely to get more information back, which could help us identify victims.
The other thing I look for is Keyes buried kill kits, often near locations where he planned on abducting people.
Had like a 50-foot coil of nylon rope, duct tape, latex gloves.
Either he would literally bury them or he would hide them in boulders.
Keyes would return to the kill kits.
So yeah, everything I took from their house I wanted to keep separate so I could go through it later. And I thought they were in that bucket where the jewelry is, where the cash is, where the cell phones are.
He told the FBI items he took from his victims are in some of these kill kits, so they are very valuable.
Head west toward Ramona Expressway.
We're going to go out to Lake Paris, where we have a very credible sighting, placing Keyes potentially with a kill kit. This particular tip came in with the FOIA files I got from the FBI in 2018. Former FBI agent Bobby Chacon is going to meet me out there. He actually worked the case and was responsible for finding one of the kill kits up in upstate New York. So this will be my first time going out to Lake Paris. It's also going to be the first time Bobby's been out to Lake Paris, so especially as someone who's seen places that Keyes has killed before. I know he's pretty eager to get his eyes on this place.
Hey.
Bobby.
Hey, Josh. Good to see you.
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, no worries. It's my backyard, kind of.
Yeah.
Bobby Chacon is one of the first people I talked to when I started digging into this case, and a really great proponent of the work I do.
I was involved in the Israel Keyes case when I was with the FBI. In fact, my dive team went to Alaska and we recovered his final victim, Samantha Koenig.
This tip came in shortly after Keyes died, before a lot of the details of the case have been made public yet.
There was somebody who identified Israel Keyes here as having met him one day.
This guy's out here fishing in March 2011, and Keyes approaches him. He starts talking about how he's hunting, and the guy's like, there's nothing out here to hunt. And Keyes like, I'm here to hunt prey. He was real creeped out by it. Keyes asks him, if you disappeared, would anyone know? He says Keyes comes out of the woods near the porta potties. He's got a rusted shovel, a Home Depot bucket, and a fishing pole. Then he sees him later hiking back up into the woods with this rusted shovel and a bucket. He said he immediately knew this was the man that he had encountered when he saw Israel Keyes' photograph.
Wow.
And so we know Keyes was active in the area at the time. And it turns out close to a year prior, Donald Tobin disappeared within 20 miles away. On top of that, we have Christine Nicole Hamilton, also found on Keyes' computer. She disappeared not far from there. If Keyes was there, what are the greater implications?
I mean, look at all the places you have to hide something if you're going to hide a kill kit, right? You can see all these boulders and these rocks here. Those are the perfect kind of terrain that he could dig a small hole behind a rock and put one of those kits in the ground, and then he could use the rock as a marker. He could make a mental note of what that rock looked like and come back to it. Now, if you had to search that whole area, it would literally take you months because there are so many boulders, and that's why it's such a good location for him to use. But if I was here with an FBI team, I'd probably have 100 agents up there searching that hill, and it could take us a month. A lot of serial killers, they have this ritual that leads up to the killing, hiding those kill kits, picking out places that he would eventually use, even if he wasn't going to use it that day, weeks, months later. This was all part of who he was as a predator. This certainly has a lot of the elements that some of his other places we know he was at, like Matanuska. Lake Matanuska is the lake where Israel Keyes deposited his last victim, Samantha Koenig, when he murdered and dismembered her. A lot of criminals that decide to use water use it again and again and again because they feel like it's a place that evidence goes and never gets recovered.
So in terms of credibility on this tip, what do you think?
I mean, look, it fits all the criteria that Keyes used to kind of pick out not only victims, but places. It definitely puts this place in contention for highly likely that something happened here.
So then it's like, well, there's probably a victim somewhere in the area. It's wild.
I'd be really surprised if there weren't bodies at the bottom of that lake.
"52-year-old Donald Tobin was last seen on July 7th. Police suspect foul play in his disappearance. We have a Keyes sighting several miles away, and the details of the disappearance match everything we know about Keyes' MO.
Every day, I comb through missing persons cases. And because of the nature of my work, I'm deeply aware of the gravity of, like, not only are each of these human beings who are attached to many other human beings, but there's so many of them. I keep going back to the main objective, which is there are families who don't know what happened to their loved one, and no one else is looking. I had covered Susie Lyle's case several years ago. Her name was found on Keyes' computer. There are a lot of significant circumstantial evidence to look at Keyes as being responsible for her disappearance. Suzanne Lyle was really intelligent, really bubbly teenage girl who grew up in the greater Albany area. Susie was a student at SUNY Albany. She was really into computers. She worked at Babbage's, which was at the time like electronics store, basically, like computer games and video games. And you have to remember, this is 1998. She was like playing online video games and like really into the digital world before the rest of us were. And one night, Susie was working at Babbage's, and after leaving Babbage's, she was never seen again. Right around the time she went missing, Keyes was living in Constable, New York. Susie was about Keyes' age, 19 years old. She had a very robust online lifestyle, and that's something that comes up in the Keyes case. He said he was going down to Albany while he was living up in Constable and going to computer labs and libraries and using computers there. At a certain point, Susie told a friend that she felt like a man had been following her. And is it possible that the man that Suzanne felt was following her was, in fact, Keyes?
Keep right to take exit 3 towards Albany International.
What's great about this trip is we're going to meet Dr. Kunkel at the airport. How's it going? Thanks for coming out. Dr. Kunkel is a criminal psychologist, one of my favorite people. He's really immersed himself in all things Keyes.
I got involved with the Lyle case as part of the St. Rose Cold Case Analysis Center. We were asked by Mary Lyle, Suzanne Lyle's mother, to get involved and look at the investigation.
If Susie was a Keyes victim, it would have been earlier on in the commission of his crimes. So he wouldn't have been as sophisticated as far back as 1997 and 1998 when his crimes began. We believe, based on sightings, that Susie either disappeared leaving her workplace or disappeared getting off the bus at SUNY's campus. It would be perfectly natural for someone who looked like Keyes to be on a college campus.
Yeah. He would draw no attention here. All right, so this is, the bus stop's over here, over closer to her dorm. It was a Monday night, and she's coming back from work. There's probably others coming from that direction, using the bus to get back to campus. It probably wasn't desolate.
Yeah. So I guess if she comes off the bus stop, you know, this is one logical route to her dorm. It could have been an abduction site.
Right, yeah.
If you're Keyes, you're looking for a place where you can lie in wait and not really be seen.
And there's not really a lot of that.
Basically, as we've been standing here, everybody who got off the bus and came to this quad walked up this walkway or down there through the trees over there and into the quad.
Yeah.
I mean, the only other point of access is like right here in front of everyone.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make any sense at all.
It's a very high-risk environment.
There's no way to track whether she actually got on the bus. Back then, they were just showing their ID as a SUNY student, and you just ride.
Now that we're here and we see how many people are around and what a short distance it is, it seems more likely that she went missing at Crossgates Mall rather than here.
We know she was at the mall.
Yeah.
That's irrefutable. She worked that day, and our manager saw her leave and said he knows what exit she took.
Around the same time that Suzanne Lyle disappeared, just miles from where she was last seen, a woman encountered a man in a Marshall's parking lot that she believed was Keys. What stood out to us was the things he was asking her. How old are you? If you left right now, would anyone notice? Some blatantly disturbing questions. These come up over and over and over again in tips in places where Keys was. We can place him in the Albany area that spring, looking to abduct someone from a mall parking lot.
Suzanne Lyle was working at the Crossgates Mall on the night of her disappearance.
More than likely, she disappeared at the mall, walking from Babbage's to the bus stop. Right around the time Suzanne Lyle went missing, Keys was working on enlisting in the Army, and the Army recruitment office was 2 miles from where she was last seen. This is where Keys enlisted in the Army. He, at that point, was really disagreeing with his parents. They were very anti-government, so it would make sense for someone rebelling, also someone who had a desire to hurt people, to join the Army. Joining the Army gives him the paycheck. And license to kill. And now maybe he's like, okay, it's time. I can start committing crimes in this area because I'm going to be leaving soon. He told the FBI that he planned his murders around travels because after a girl is abducted, no one's going to look at the guy who goes off to the Army or left at 4 in the morning to go on a vacation. He wanted to create as much distance, like physically and psychologically, between himself and his crimes.
So the Marshall's location to here is interesting. Basically just right across the street. It doesn't seem like he was actually trying to abduct her. It almost seems like he was ramping up. He was testing to decide what he'll do next.
But what killed me is walking out here, and the first thing you see is a cemetery.
I know.
He told the FBI cemetery outbuildings were easy to gain access to, and they were great places to rape and murder victims. And walkable through the woods to 6 Mile Waterworks Park, where there's a reservoir and tons of outbuildings.
Yeah. When you bring up 6 Mile Waterworks, it's the only body of water within like this 3-4 mile radius between the 2 malls, the campus, parking lot.
And 6 Mile Waterworks Park is in the center of all 4 points: Colony Center, Marshall's, SUNY, and Babbage's. You can walk through the park from any 4 of those points without really being seen. The fact that he could walk through that park unseen to all 4 destinations is fascinating. You had said they'd searched it pretty extensively, right?
Well, they said they did, but I believe they didn't use dogs and they never checked the water.
And at this point, we know Keys liked to submerge his victims' remains in water. If it was Keys, Susie's final resting place is possibly Waterworks Park.
The timing of her abduction and his being in the area, and then the other signature Keys offense patterns, that it just makes sense.
There was a lot of compelling evidence there, but we can't say for sure we've solved the case. I don't think in terms of justice or closure, because I don't think there can be justice or closure in family upheaval. I think about Susie Lyle a lot in this regard. Imagine being known worldwide only for the worst thing to ever happen to you. And when people want to talk about Susie, that's what they want to talk about. The first time I met Dr. Kunkel, I was invited to speak at an event in Saratoga Springs. Mary Lyle, Susie's mother, was going to be there, and I got to meet her, and it was so humbling to meet Susie's mom and hear her talk about Susie. I felt like I got to know who she was from the person who knew her the best. So, in a sense, if there is an obligation, it is to treat these people like more than just the worst thing that ever happened to them.
Both Chris and I are committed to investigating until there are no stones left to turn over.
All right. Yeah, take care, Chris.
Until then, I find myself obsessively driving the back roads of Berkshire County and upstate New York, looking for something.
In addition to the Suzanne Lyle case, there are others that I'm quite confident were keys, but I still would like a little more reassurances on. The first two are Cammie and Jean. Cammie was a high school student living in Oregon. She was 16. She had just met this boyfriend, Eugene, and they decided to go for a walk out on the Oregon coast, and no one ever saw him again. The police quickly leaned into the theory they'd been swept out to sea, and ultimately, the police stopped looking into it. Keyes had told the FBI that following his discharge from the Army, he had abducted a male-female couple from either Washington State or one of its surrounding states. I've looked into it extensively. There's only one case that matches that description, and it's Cammie and Eugene's case. Obviously, since the first episode, you know, I've had family members reach out to me, which is great, because that is an honor and a privilege and quite humbling to have those experiences and relationships and get to know these people and know that they value the work I'm doing. I'm always anxious about covering someone's case because I don't know how the family's going to feel about it, and I was appreciative that you reached out to me. I don't know, you've done a really good job of, like, bringing her to life and making sure she stays in the forefront of people's memories, and it's really wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, she was a special person. She was.
I mean, I've reached out to Lincoln County. I have not heard back, but I keep hoping the FBI will, like, release more of the redacted files at some point, and I think that's the best thing we can wish for.
And I cannot thank you enough. Like, seriously.
I have done very little, so I did the bare minimum.
No. Hands down. You've done so much. I'm just grateful that you want closure for the families, whether it's my family or other people's families.
We've also seen that while his memory for locations is startlingly accurate, it's the first time I've had a job that I believe in the work that I'm doing. I've even had law enforcement reach out to me to be like, hey, we have this missing persons case, do you think it's Keyes?
The most infuriating thing about investigating Israel Keyes is without a body or biometric evidence, it's nearly impossible to truly confirm he's responsible for any missing person.
There are all these families who don't know what happened to their loved ones. At this point, I am invested, and I care immensely. Maybe a very small price to pay for that is like, yeah, a serial killer lives rent-free in the back of my brain for the rest of my life.
The problem is nowadays, the more stuff my name is attached to, the more likely it is that somebody's gonna try to do some kind of stupid freaking TV special, or you know how it is nowadays, like with all this true crime.
When I started putting the podcast together and writing the first season, I was very compelled by that line. Like, I don't want to be wrapped up in all this true crime bull. It's what I ultimately named the podcast. I thought it was a nice cue to Keys to be like, hey, not only is the media covering your case, but we're using your words to do it. More and more people are learning about Keys, and we're getting more and more information because of that, which could help us identify victims, which will help bring some resolve to families who, for now, over a decade, don't know what happened to their loved ones.
Like a bright red rose, always fragrant and seductive. I see you coming back in my sleep. The nostalgia's overflowing, it cannot be quenched. The nostalgia is gentle and very gentle. The nostalgia is gentle and very gentle. The nostalgia is gentle and very gentle.
Usually buckets full of weapons, rape tools, sometimes costumes. Keys talked about hiking there, thinking about burying a kill kit there. He'd gone out there looking for victims. So.
And it's right off the road, so when you're driving through, you would see it and be like, oh, maybe I'll stop there.
It's a tourist destination. It seems like a really easy place to bury a body and have nobody question it.
It's heavy stuff to do on your own. And I was, in the first 2 years, working 68 to 80 hours a week on this by myself with no one really to turn to.
I think it was because they were doing construction, right? Is that what you figured out?
They had done construction since she was...
I was never looking for a team. It happened very organically. There was no way I was inviting someone into this thing that I cared so much about, that I'd already poured years of my life into.
Episode a couple weeks ago.
3 people weaseled their way in, and now I don't know what I'd do without them.
I have no idea how I feel.
As an investigative journalist, one thing that we can do that the police can't always do is we have the time to kind of follow the rabbit holes that we want to follow.
But isn't that...
I want to say certainty doesn't exist without forensic evidence. And I am not there yet, and I don't know that I will ever have the tools to be there. So unfortunately, at this point, it's me hopefully inspiring people who do have the tools to do the work. What's been really important to me is taking trips to places Keys went to look into potential victims. What I can do in the field is see things that a computer can never show me. Being on the ground, you have a better understanding of the culture of an environment. And also, would someone like Israel Keys blend in here, or would he stick out? Southern California is what I call a hot spot. It's these places we can put Keys in over and over and over again. So this trip, I'm going down because there's a missing persons case out of Riverside County that I believe could be a Keys case. We've done as much as we can online. Now I'd actually like to go see the terrain myself. California is critical because Keys' girlfriend did a lot of work down here. I know for a fact he came down to Riverside or to this general area
at least twice to visit her while she was working. There's a gentleman who disappeared from Riverside at a time where we can't place keys anywhere. Donald Tobin, he's an older gay man who was living in Riverside, decided to go take some stuff to storage one day, and he was never seen again. Donald Tobin was last seen July 7th of 2010. His car was found about a mile from his house, and all the stuff he was going to take to storage was still in it. It was found in a place he would never go. It's a dog park near the freeway. And that was it. No one could explain what happened. We've also got Keyes' online search records looking for someone who disappeared in Riverside County that week when Donald Tobin disappeared. We looked at the timeline, and it's very tight, but Keyes was unaccounted for in about 20 hours surrounding Donald's disappearance. And as we got further into the investigation, we realized there was a very good likelihood that Keyes was trolling gay men online. Donald was gay. Keyes, he never came out of the closet socially, but he was bisexual and sexually motivated. I hope I can find how easy it is to stay concealed there and how easy it is to get from where the car was found to this gentleman's house without being seen. Something that will either make it seem more certain that it was Keyes or rule Keyes out.
One family.
Oh my God.
Possible 45.
2 horrible tragedies. That's pretty dark stuff. At sea and on land.
My father, he is in bed and someone shot him in the head.
Do you remember what you noticed?
First thing I thought is this crime scene is staged.
Linda always felt that she deserved more than what she was getting, because she and my dad were always butting heads.
We've got no weapons, we've got no enemies that we know of.
That we know of. And no more details, because she disappears.
I told her not to go on that boat.
So she went out of the way to give them information in case something happened.
Yes, indeed.
It's just getting wilder and wilder because in the middle of the ocean, nobody can hear you scream.
Every fisherman has a story about the one that got away. And this is Nathan Carmen's. The 22-year-old was set to meet up with his mom, Linda, for a late-night fishing trip out here off the coast of Rhode Island. But for Linda, the trip was less about catching bass and more about bonding with her son.
Fishing was one of the things that brought them together, and that was Linda really giving herself to the experience because Linda hated fishing. Linda didn't eat fish, but she thought this was the only thing that made Nathan happy, and she wanted to connect with her son in any way possible.
That was a common occurrence. They used to go either weekly or sometimes bi-weekly.
Nathan and his mother, they'd taken a boating course. They had some fundamental knowledge, but they stuck pretty close to land and were fishing for stripers and blues.
Nathan's experience was, I would characterize him as a recreational fisherman.
Mom and son planned to cruise toward Block Island in this boat which Nathan recently bought, one that just passed inspection by the Coast Guard a month earlier. That's comforting to Linda, who has a better to be safe than sorry approach when it comes to boating.
So she begins to tell her friends about this fishing trip and shares information as to where they're going to be at specific times during that trip.
Linda is so cautious. She even texts photos of the boat and its registration number to her friends so it can be easily spotted if the boat breaks down.
You're relying on your engine, you're relying on electronics to get you there.
On a starless night with calm seas, the two depart Ram Point Marina in Rhode Island at about 11 p.m. Linda texts her friends that the journey is underway. The boat is never seen or heard from again.
One of my sisters had called me and it said Linda and Nathan are missing. And I kind of freaked out.
Linda's friends begin to worry on Sunday of that weekend because Linda had claimed that she was going to come back and text them when she arrived.
Linda always did a float log. And, you know, when Linda got back, she'd call her friend Sharon, and Sharon never received the phone call.
That's when two of her best friends reach out to authorities and say, something has happened. There are 2 missing boaters off the coast of Rhode Island. We need your help.
It started out as a typical missing persons investigation, which is not criminal in nature. Our first order of business is naturally to find the missing people, gather the facts and circumstances to try to determine how they potentially went missing. Oftentimes people are not missing, they're just overdue.
The U.S. Coast Guard quickly begins a search over the Atlantic.
The United States Coast Guard really deployed every available resource that they had to find this missing boat. They deployed fixed-wing aircraft, reconnaissance planes, Coast Guard cutters.
Given the nature of the success rate that the Coast Guard has with search and rescue, I was very, very shocked that they were not finding anything.
We defer to the Coast Guard for search and rescue efforts. In that respect, they were really scouring the ocean, and the search efforts came up unsuccessful.
I think it was day 6 that the Coast Guard made a decision to call off any additional search. And at that point, they had covered 64,000 square nautical miles, which is a massive, massive search area.
So the Orient Lucky, which is a Chinese cargo ship, and they were out around 115 miles south of Martha's Vineyard as they were shifting ballast in their ship.
The Orient Lucky routinely travels the high seas picking up cargo, but this time it will make headlines for picking up something else. Lucky indeed.
They saw what they believed was an orange ball popping out of the ocean about 1 square nautical mile from where the cargo ship was positioned at the time. And when they got a little closer, they realized it was a life raft. And inside that life raft was a figure, a young man standing and waving a flag in distress. Getting this large freighter close enough to not kill Nathan Carman, but save Nathan Carman was a challenge. And I think the captain made a certain maneuver that allowed them to get a little closer to Nathan where they could deploy a life ring, and the life ring landed several feet away from where the life raft was. So Nathan then had to jump out of the life raft and swim.
The stunned crew members document the rescue with a series of photos and videos. Once he's on board, Nathan is offered hot soup, water, and dry clothes.
I got a call from my supervisor saying that Nathan had been recovered by a passing ship. I was shocked, and I was thankful that there was a survivor.
The rescue, a kind of needle in a haystack, becomes international news.
And a man lost at sea with his mother for 8 days has been found alive in good condition.
There were pictures of Nathan that were on the front page of newspapers all over the world because everybody thought that this was a wild story.
Next tonight here, the family mystery at sea. More than 100 miles from land, the discovery, and authorities asking what happened.
Nathan, this is United States Coast Guard, Boston. Over.
Mom and I, 2 people, myself and my mom, were fishing, and there was a funny noise in the engine compartment. I looked and saw a lot of water. The boat dropped out from under my feet. When I saw the life raft, I did not see my mom. Have you found her?
No, we haven't been able to find her yet.
Nathan Carman is still on that freighter. He's expected to arrive in Boston tomorrow night.
So now we can start to maybe get some insight as to what transpired and why it transpired. But it was also concerning because Linda hadn't been recovered.
Happy to be back on land, but exhausted by his ordeal, Nathan heads home and asks for privacy.
I would just like to thank the public for their prayers and for their concern for both my mother and for myself.
It's not the first time this family has dealt with drama and tragedy.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
This is a nautical map. The area that Nathan departed from is right up here. His transit would have taken him down this body of water here. And that is the point in which one of the individuals traveling inbound observed Nathan and Linda on the boat. And that was the last time that anyone saw the boat.
In the days and weeks after his dramatic sea rescue, Nathan finds himself just as alone on land as he was at sea. And he feels like the media has gotten his story wrong. So he agrees to an interview with ABC News.
Well, it would be great to have people embracing you, saying, we're glad you're home, we're glad you're alive. It hasn't been that.
Loneliness seems to be Nathan's constant companion. He grew up an only child. His parents divorced when he was little. Kids made fun of him at school.
I heard people trying to imitate him or, try to make fun of the way he spoke. And I've definitely seen people mock the way he ran down the hallway.
I got the impression that a lot of people didn't try to talk to him, and maybe that kind of contributed to his loneliness or feeling isolated and uncomfortable being in crowds and with other people.
His best friend in the world was one who wouldn't judge him, a horse named Cruz.
Yes, I was very fortunate in that regard, and I was able to really form a strong bond emotionally.
Cruz and Nathan had a very tight bond. It was definitely his best friend, his confidant. I went to the stable once with Linda and Nathan. We were ready to leave the stable. I said, well, where's Nathan? Go on in and get Nathan. She's like, no, Nathan loves to spend time with Cruz alone before we leave. And he was there for probably a good half hour, if not longer, just spending time with Cruz in his stall.
But when Nathan is 17, that bond shatters. Cruz dies. Devastated, Nathan runs away from his Connecticut home. Nathan doesn't stop running until he reaches Virginia, 600 miles away. That's where a sheriff's deputy finds him.
Running away from home was something that I felt that I had to do at the time. I don't fully understand or comprehend that sitting here now.
A couple of interesting things Nathan had on him on his possession when he was found in Virginia. He had $4,000 in cash. That money had been given to him by his grandfather, but he also had a couple of photos of his horse, Cruz. And he had a Ziploc bag with some of the horse's hair in it.
His parents drive all night to Virginia to bring Nathan home.
Clark Carmen told me that Nathan had fled to a horse farm, or that's where he was supposed to be going, in Florida, because Nathan had told his father that that was a place that he could feel normal.
Nathan is diagnosed with Asperger's, which we now know as autism spectrum disorder. Social interactions and communication skills can be challenging.
I'm not someone who understands relationships or who's good about talking about emotions.
But Nathan does share a close relationship with his grandfather, John Chocolos, a wealthy real estate developer who made his fortune in the nursing home business.
My dad had 5 sisters and 4 daughters, and then he had his first grandchild. That I think Linda was really excited that she had a boy to bring into my dad's life.
And then Nathan comes along, and he's your uncle's first grandchild. He doted on him.
Right.
How excited was he to have a grandson?
I mean, there's not really even words for it. He had such great hopes for that kid.
Tell me about the daughters in the family.
I think they were all different individuals. Elaine was the oldest. The next one down was Linda. She was more like John, personality-wise. Charlene is the next one down. Valerie's the youngest. I think she was kind of like the apple of John's eye.
My grandfather was the closest person to me. He was like a father to me, and I know I was like a son to him.
When it comes to business, Nathan, a teenager, has a pretty unusual role at his grandfather's company, one that requires him to look and listen closely.
John Chaklis brought Nathan to all of his business dealings because John Chaklis was hard of hearing, and Nathan was his both eyes and ears at every business meeting. They would consult each other after the business meetings were completed. So I think that, you know, John Chaklis was grooming Nathan to take over the family business.
I got the feeling that John had a very good relationship with him and was trying to cultivate that. Nathan was as introverted as John was extroverted, I think.
What was his relationship like as Nathan is growing up? You said there weren't enough words.
He kind of treated him the same way that he treated me when I was a kid. You know, I mean, he couldn't do enough for him. The only problem with it is that John always looked at a problem. If there's a problem, if you throw enough money at it, it's going to solve it.
John Chaklis doted on Nathan, gave him anything he wanted, whether it was a credit card or a new truck or a new apartment. There was nothing that Nathan needed because John was always there with his checkbook or his credit card to give Nathan anything he wanted.
With a support system like his granddad, Nathan's future could be limitless until one phone call changes everything.
Oh my God! Oh my God! The front door was locked. Oh my God!
Possible 45.
Oh my God! I don't even know what to do. I don't even know where to look.
Windsor, Connecticut, a typical small town. Pretty nice community. You know, not a lot of crime. Murders in Windsor are very rare.
Not rare enough for the man living on Overlook Drive. John Chaklis was a self-made man here in Windsor, Connecticut, running his multi-million-dollar real estate business out of his modest home. That is until the morning of December 20th, 2013. Police arrive here after getting an urgent 911 call.
Okay, what's the emergency?
I came to check on my father to pick him up for an activity. He is in bed and someone shot him in the head.
Is he still alive?
I don't think so. I walked into the bedroom and there's blood all over the back wall.
When I saw the news and my dad being brought out, you know, in a body bag and them saying it was a murder, and I lost it. I lost it. I fell to the floor and I'm crying hysterically.
My name is Scott McGregor. In 2013, I was a detective for the Windsor Police Department. Mr. Chaklis was found in a bedroom on the upper part of the house. In his bed, we found him that he had been shot 3 times.
The scene says a lot to the detective, not for what's in the house, but for what isn't.
You obviously start looking for evidence, and when you can't find spent shell casings, once again, you go back to whoever did this, you know, took the time to retrieve those casings and not leave evidence behind. That kind of tells us that the person planned this out, knew to cover their steps, which ultimately makes our investigation harder.
Sergeant Chris McKee also gets the call to head to Overlook Drive, a quiet street with a quiet resident who wasn't exactly well known around town. How did he fit into the community in terms of how he had accumulated his wealth? Was he kind of like a little local success story?
I gotta say, he ran in his circles and his business circles. He wasn't known in Windsor, you know, and I was very active in community roles in the department, and like I said, I wasn't aware of him until this investigation.
McKee walks into a bloody scene. You're looking around the room. Do you remember what you noticed?
A little further down from Mr. Chocolos's bedroom, there was a glass door, or a door with glass panes that led into the backyard. The officer and I observed that there was broken glass.
A break-in?
Well, it looked like it was meant to be a break-in, but looking at it, it was very clear that the glass had been punched from the wrong side, and it was very suspicious. First thing I thought is this crime scene is staged.
The recently widowed victim was known to keep cash in his house, but after the shots were fired, the gunman left. The money still there. Was there any sense that it had been ransacked or robbed?
There had been large sums of money in the house and other valuables, and honestly, nothing appeared touched. It told me that this was personal.
The devastated family speaks out on local news, hoping to catch a killer.
My father, while he lived a small life, he was a very large man. And to know him, you could never forget him.
Anyone could have done this.
This person killed at least once that we know of. This person's gotten away with murder. And chances are it will happen again.
When we start any murder investigation, we want to do a timeline. We want to start trying to find out who was with John.
My father, my mother passed November 21st. My father, for 2 weeks, was staying with one of us, or Linda was staying at my father's house.
Another curious thing about the home, it doesn't exactly look like a millionaire lives there. One of the victim's daughters explains why.
My father has an elaborate estate. The man's worth at least $40 to $50 million. It's huge. You wouldn't know it going into the house. That's the only reason why I'm bringing up my father's financial worth. Is because looking at this house, you would not know that he has a 25,000 square foot house up in New Hampshire.
You find out that this is a prominent businessman, a wealthy businessman.
Yep.
What does that say to you initially about this?
Kind of starts to focus investigators in on, was this financially motivated? Did someone have, this gentleman had a lot of money, a lot of properties, did someone have something to gain financially from his death?
The videos of the Windsor police interviewing various family members have never been broadcast before.
Nathan and I went fishing. We went out of Point Judith, Rhode Island. Okay. So we went on a cod trip. That left at 6 in the morning, got back into port at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
A long day.
We learned that John, the day before, the last person to see him was his grandson, Nathan Carmen. We learned that through talking to Nathan, talking to family.
Hey Nathan, what's your last name? My last name is spelled C-A-R-M-A-N.
We have to treat everyone as a possible suspect. Family, associates, people who worked in the office, neighbors, anything. Anyone could have done this.
Investigators asked Nathan about employees at Chocolos's company, and the grandson mentions one who, he says, complains about being overworked and underpaid.
Just that I'm underpaid, also the stress load. I have 101 things to do. I have to get all these papers in. Now you're asking me to do this and the other thing. So he would bitch and moan about that.
The bookkeeper is, in fact, stealing from the Chocolos's company.
So obviously he's someone we want to talk to.
Nathan begins outlining his final evening with his grandfather to investigators. It begins with dinner. He was going to come here and eat that night with Nathan.
That was the plan, and he wanted me to come too. Yeah. And, I said, look, you guys go do it. If I only knew what I knew, now.
After their meal, Nathan and his grandfather return to the Windsor home. At some point, John Chocolos gets a phone call and puts it on speaker.
I think that there's a real possibility that the person who called him may have been a mistress. I don't like saying that my grandfather was doing that, but I think there's that real possibility.
It wasn't one of your aunts?
No, it was not one of my aunts. It was not one of my aunts, no one in the family. Very young, 23. And he then told that female voice to just wait, hold on a second. He showed me to the door.
Nathan Carmen is correct. There is a young woman Chakalos has been talking to.
And she became a suspect. Did you go anywhere else that night or anything like that? Or did you just stay home?
No, I didn't sleep because I was supposed to be at meet my mom at 3 o'clock. When I fall asleep, I have difficulty waking up. So I tried to stay awake. I did run out to Stop and Shop, and I got some ice cream for myself. I picked up a few AAA batteries because I was out of them, and then I headed home. Then I stayed until I went back out to meet my mom.
Investigators don't have much to go on, with the exception of some security camera footage, which they used to retrace the last days of John Chakalos's life. Like this casino video, where the 87-year-old is seen with a much younger woman. Will it provide investigators with answers? The Windsor Police Department may not know who killed John Chakalos yet, but they are beginning to understand who did not. Remember the woman Nathan heard on the phone? And the woman at the casino? They are one and the same.
So John Chakalos struck up a relationship with a 25-year-old woman over the course of a year.
She was an acquaintance of John who was going to the casino, staying overnight. The night of the homicide, she confirmed that she had talked to John, but she was kind of quickly dismissed as being involved.
Investigators have also tracked down that bookkeeper Nathan mentioned. His name is William Sati, and he too is cleared.
He had an alibi that night and was confirmed. I think he was actually out of the state at the time. I think we found him in Rhode Island.
While cleared as a suspect in the murder, Sati was later convicted of stealing some $400,000 from Chakalos's company.
But that's small change compared to the money the patriarch was handing over to family members every year.
One of the problem children was Linda. Linda was taking John's allowances and going off on spending sprees at casinos or going skiing or taking these lavish trips around the world.
Linda always felt that she deserved more than what she was getting. I don't know why she felt that way. I don't know, because she and my dad were always butting heads.
Father and daughter also butt heads over the way Nathan is being raised.
The relationship between John and Linda was always volatile, but one day it turned violent. And that was over Nathan's care. Nathan was put into a psychiatric hospital shortly after his horse, Cruz, had died. And the accusations begin to fly. Linda accuses John of smothering her son with all sorts of riches, and John is yelling at Linda, saying that she is a bad mother and that Nathan is normal and that Nathan should be treated as such. And at one point, John reaches across the table and grabs Linda by the hair and starts to pull it. So Linda swings and she starts to fight back at her father. And it's a combustible moment that probably lasted a minute plus. And they're swinging at each other, they're fighting each other, and the orderlies are summoned as well as the local police, and Linda is arrested right on the spot.
Linda chalks it up as two people cut from the same cloth.
I don't back down from my father. Yeah.
And that's just his personality not to back down.
Yeah,
Sure.
and it's not his personality to back down either. So if anyone would have fought with him, you know, it would have been me.
Linda has spent many more years fighting to protect her son from those who might treat him unkindly.
I know he led a very lonely life. You know, it's at the age where kids were being invited to birthday parties and, you know, having play dates. And nobody was calling for Nathan to go to the birthday party. And, it was sad, and she hated that for her child. Any mother would hate it if her child wasn't included in anything. But yeah, it must have been hard for Linda not being able to fix that. Linda was a fixer. Linda had to fix things, or at least try to fix things, and she just could not fix that.
Linda and Nathan had a very unique and conflicted relationship. Nathan saw his mother as somebody who was incredibly domineering, and Linda was always trying to get him the therapy that she thought he needed. And I think Nathan wanted to get as far away from his mother as possible because Nathan didn't want to feel different from anybody else.
And with his grandfather, Nathan feels like a success. He learns about business. He's a confidant to John Chocolos. His college tuition is paid for, and so is the rent on his apartment and his credit card bills. Linda couldn't compete with that.
I think what it comes down to is Nathan's always felt torn between me and my father.
Picking sides.
Like he had to pick a side.
How's your relationship in general to your mother?
I did move out of our house, and when we were not on good terms, but I since started speaking to her again. Probably about a year ago.
Did that concern you at all in terms of looking at him as a suspect, that maybe he might exhibit behavior that you wouldn't normally see, but he does have a disorder?
That was a concern of many of us, is are the behaviors we're seeing, are the answers he's giving in that one interview that he did grant, are these more aligned with behaviors perhaps of someone who is on the autism spectrum? Or can we look at these for what we normally would kind of think, this is kind of sketchy, a little suspicious, we want to delve more into this.
Was your grandpa involved during that time?
Yes, my grandpa, he facilitated financially my ability to go off on her.
So for Linda, the recent fishing trips are a way of pulling her son back into her life. But now there's the murder of her father to deal with and lots of money at stake. Everybody is under the microscope.
Do you own any weapons?
No.
Anybody else in the family own any weapons?
No.
Anybody have access to any weapons? Anybody that knows anybody that has weapons? Nothing at all. Okay. So we've got no weapons, we've got no enemies we know of.
That we know of.
Do you own any firearms?
I do have an air gun. Okay. I'm not sure if that counts as a firearm, but...
Is it the only?
Yes, it is.
But after speaking with a long line of friends, family, and business associates, investigators are about to realize they've been lied to. In the wake of 87-year-old John Chocolos' brutal murder, investigators have few leads, with one notable exception: fragments of the bullets fired at the victim. There's hope that they could be traced back to a possible murder weapon.
What kind of weapon was used to kill him?
It was believed to be a rifle because it was a .308 cartridge, a certain type of bullet.
And a ballistics test concludes the gun used was most likely a Sig Sauer rifle, like this one.
But in the wake of the Newtown massacre, these types of weapons were illegal to own in Connecticut, where Chocolos was murdered.
The detectives focused a lot of their attention on New Hampshire. They scoured gun dealers, I think well over 600 gun dealers, looking for that Sig Sauer rifle.
Eventually, investigators make their way to a place called Shooter's Outpost and speak with salesman Jed Warner about recent purchases. He remembers an interaction with a customer just weeks earlier.
He definitely stood out because he looked like he came off like a construction site. His pants were dirty. He was wearing like a pair of dirty boots, like a construction feel about him. We started talking about rifles and targeting. He said, actually, I'm very interested in the Sig Sauer 716.
It's an expensive rifle, retailing for almost $2,000. Jed says he suggested other options that were more economical for target shooting, but the buyer knows what he wants.
We do all the paperwork, do the background, he passes. He just kind of walked straight out, and that was the last we saw of him. 2 officers from the Windsor area were there, and then a local, like a Connecticut ATF agent. We had to like go through all the stuff, try to figure out the day of sale.
And there they find it, a bill of sale for a Sig Sauer rifle. The name of the purchaser, Nathan Carmen.
And that became an incredible aha moment for investigators and potentially the smoking gun in this case.
After the discovery at Shooter's Outpost, Nathan is asked again about owning any guns.
And since, because I just wasn't feeling safe at home, I did buy a shotgun.
You did buy a shotgun?
That's correct.
Any other purchases of a firearm anytime?
No.
And that wasn't ever volunteered or brought up until investigators found this out-of-state bill of sale and then confronted Nathan with it.
And how did he respond?
Well, he acknowledged that he had bought this weapon. When asked about it, he said he lost it. And he didn't know where the gun was.
That had to be really a red flag for you all.
It was.
Most people don't lose those firearms or any firearm. But yeah, you don't normally hear, I don't know where it is.
And there was no report of him, making a report that it was stolen, lost, etc.
So what are you thinking at this point? You've been kind of connecting these dots.
Well, it gets better. There was at least 1 hour of unaccounted time during which Mr. Chocolos was shot that Nathan couldn't account for his time.
Linda arrives at this Home Depot parking lot at 3 a.m., where she and Nathan are set to meet up to go fishing. But Nathan is nowhere to be found.
You left your house on about 3, and we know you got to Glassbury, based on your own words, on about 4. Why would it take an hour to travel, and I'm guessing 20-something miles, at the rate of 65 miles an hour? It's just mathematically not possible.
On or around 3, not on or about 3.
So
perhaps after.
But this security footage taken outside Nathan's apartment complex shows him leaving at 2:57 a.m. Linda tries calling her son 3 times, but his phone appears to be turned off. He finally calls her back at 4:01 a.m.
Did you think you were closing in on an arrest?
I thought so. Yes.
I have to ask you straight up, were you involved in your grandfather's death? Did you kill
Absolutely not. No.
But that potential smoking gun, the Sig Sauer rifle, is still missing. Despite a months-long extensive search of Nathan's apartment, the Chocolos estate, and surrounding areas for that crucial piece of evidence, it's nowhere to be found.
And I think that's exactly what they were pinning their entire case on, was that murder weapon. Had they found it and connected it to Nathan, then Nathan would have been in handcuffs.
And so law enforcement was directed to keep working to try to build the case.
This had to be frustrating.
It just tears at you because you think you've got it. The family had put up a huge billboard on Interstate 91, and coming and going to work every day, I would see that. I would see Mr. Chocolos's face. I would see, reward money for information.
Even though Nathan is under a cloud of suspicion, he's still a free man, but feels like he's an outcast in his own community now. So he takes a portion of his inheritance that had been given to him by his grandfather, and he leaves the state. He travels to Vermont, and he buys an historic farmhouse, and he also bought a boat.
Nathan buys a 31-foot fishing boat, formerly called the Chicken Pox. He plans another fishing outing with his mom, Linda, who has stood by him throughout all the accusations.
And Linda is very excited about that opportunity, but also very concerned because she knows that her son is not an experienced fisherman or an experienced boater.
Linda tells friends that the plan was to fish off the coast of Block Island and head back the next morning.
She was so concerned that she had a text message conversation with people ashore, and that's a smart thing to do, to let people know what your plans are.
So she went out of the way to give them information in case something happened.
Yes, indeed.
When Linda fails to check in, her friends start to worry.
Two of her best friends reach out to authorities and say, something has happened, we need your help.
At first, we were like, okay, hopefully it's just they're overdue and they're gonna come back to shore.
But after several days elapse, authorities search Nathan's home and vehicle and find some alarming items.
We start thinking that he may have intent to either harm himself and his mother or both of them.
How did you get word that something had gone wrong with that?
My cousin Charlene called me and told me that they were missing. And I said, I told her not to go on that boat.
Here is Nathan in a 31-foot aluminum boat with his mother, who's got no experience boating, and he thinks that he's the master fisherman or the master boater. Or does he think this is the perfect place to kill his mother? Because in the middle of the ocean, nobody can hear you scream.
But what really happened on that boat? Nathan Carman answers tough questions under oath.
How often did you lie to the Windsor Police Department?
There was one inaccurate.
Staring out at that open water, probably wondering what happened to my mother, or thinking, did I just get away with murder?
His mother is still missing and feared dead.
And the question becomes, what happened? Everybody wants to know what happened.
I didn't know if she had been dragged down with the ship. Neither of us had been wearing life vests.
The media coverage was huge.
I'm just asking you to defend yourself against these people who are saying that you did something to your boat that would make it sink.
Yeah, we're done for this evening, period.
He was shooting himself in the foot on national TV.
It is absolutely unfair for the police to use the tragedy that happened to my mother and I as an opportunity to try to nail me for a murder that I didn't commit.
Nathan's grandfather, John Chocolus, had been shot to death 3 years prior to the disappearance of Linda Carman. And once those connections were made, the story amplified.
You were convinced that Nathan had killed his grandfather.
Correct.
And now you're convinced that he killed his own mother?
It's a story about greed and heartless brutality.
Mr. Chocolus was found in a bedroom on the upper part of the house, in his bed, shot several times in the head. We have to treat everyone as a possible suspect. Anyone could have done this.
But my sisters had told me they suspected Nathan. And that just totally blew me out of the water.
The daughters of John Chocolus got very angry that there was really nothing happening with the case. They couldn't find the murder weapon. They hadn't arrested Nathan Carman.
And it's just getting wilder and wilder.
Could a family be this burdened to have a second catastrophic event? I didn't know. This is slowly starting to move from a missing persons case to something other than a missing persons case.
It's been 3 years since John Chocolos's murder, with no charges ever filed. Now, the family is facing yet another tragedy as Chocolos's grandson, Nathan Carman's boat sinks on a fishing trip, with Nathan's mom, Linda, missing and presumed drowned. We're going to head out on a ride on the open water to get a better idea of what happened out here. I met up with Dave Farrell, a maritime lawyer for Nathan's boat insurers. So let's pick up with when the Coast Guard gets involved in this.
They had a lot of vessels out here. They had a lot of aerial searches, and they were really crisscrossing an area that eventually was 64,000 square miles.
That's a big coverage area.
Yeah, the state of Georgia.
And then 2 days later, there's a big shock.
The Orient Lucky finds a life raft 106 miles south of Martha's Vineyard, and in it is Nathan Carman alone.
With his crew already snapping pictures and recording video, the ship's captain is alerted to a life raft in the water.
After spotting Nathan Carman and his life raft at sea, I sounded the alarm for our crew to prepare for the rescue efforts, and we were ready to rescue him.
They threw him a life ring, and he grabbed it with his hands. He got dragged up toward the hull of the ship. He was able to push off the side of the ship with his outstretched hand, and he was able to climb up the gangway.
He got onto the ladder. We pulled the ladder up on board.
When Nathan gets aboard the Orient Lucky, the kid looked like Aquaman. There was no physical distress in his well-being. He wasn't dehydrated. He was not hypothermic.
The captain of the Orient Lucky doesn't see anything wrong with him. This is astounding.
I got the call from my supervisor that he'd been located and recovered. I was shocked, and I was thankful. I was happy that there was a survivor, but it was also concerning because Linda hadn't been recovered.
When I found out that, Linda was lost at sea and, I knew she wasn't coming back, it was just, I just had flashbacks of us growing up and just, the good times that we did have. And then, of course, the guilt and the regret that I had of how I treated her in the end. You just don't think that you're going to lose somebody so suddenly like that.
We receive a call from the Coast Guard that Nathan was picked up by a merchant vessel in the shipping lanes in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. First thing you say is, okay, where's Linda? Linda's not with him, just Nathan.
Back on land, with his lawyer present, Nathan's interviewed by Alfred Bucco, an investigator with the South Kingston, Rhode Island Police Department. This audio's never been broadcast before.
I just went in there and said, Nathan, tell me what happened.
We went out to Block Canyon. It was light, but the sun wasn't over the horizon yet. And we started trolling. Okay. And I heard strange noise coming from the engine compartment. So I opened up the hatch in front of the pilot house, and I saw that there was a lot of water in the bilge.
He went and shut down the engine and moved aft to where his mother was.
He said he told his mom to reel in the lines. How did he describe what was happening with the commotion?
He said to his mother only one thing during this calamity, and it was reel in the lines. And she said only one thing in return, okay, I will. At that point, he went up into the wheelhouse, and he says that he started moving emergency gear up to the bow. He wasn't quite ready to abandon ship, but he wanted to be ready.
I didn't realize we were sinking. Okay. I knew there was water in the bilge. I knew there was a lot of water because it was already up to that level, just why I wanted to bring the safety stuff as a precaution. Okay. But I thought I was going to find the problem and fix it.
The third time that he's been in the wheelhouse and failed to radio, he's walking forward to the bow, and all of a sudden, in a split second, the boat sinks.
Boats don't sink that fast.
No. And it sank quickly, like immediately it was out of sight. And that's how he says he never saw his mother again.
He calls for his mother throughout the rest of the day. And he said upon nightfall, he gave up trying to search for her, and he went to sleep and then drifted through the Atlantic Ocean until he was located.
So let's get back to your mother. You talk to her, all the time. You go out fishing twice a week. How would you describe, your relationship with her? Is it good?
I don't see the relevance to this particular incident here.
Yeah, I concur.
I think this interview's over. Thank you, though.
After the interview was over, from our perspective, we're like, okay, this isn't just a missing persons investigation. We may be dealing with maybe a homicide.
Captain Heng Dong observed Nathan walking the deck of the Orient Lucky for hours at a time by himself, staring out at that open water, probably wondering what happened to my mother, or thinking, did I just get away with murder?
And soon, the whole world will hear from Nathan Carman in his own words.
She'd always been kind of reluctant about safety. I guess she had good reason to be.
New developments in that mystery at sea. Rescued after 8 days in a life raft, searchers had given up.
Nathan Carman and his mother went fishing last week. He survived the ordeal, but his mother didn't make it.
Now authorities are trying to figure out what happened.
The media coverage was huge. This was a story that made headlines around the country.
Initially, Nathan avoids the media, but eventually agrees to an interview with then ABC News correspondent Lindsay Janis in 2017. At his suggestion, they meet at a park near his home.
So take me through that evening. You met at the marina in Rhode Island, and then what?
Oh, we met at the marina in Rhode Island, and we had bait, which we got on board. And as we were heading out into the harbor, I had asked her a couple times in the past, will you go to the canyons with me? And she'd always been kind of reluctant about safety, and I guess she had good reason to be.
While Nathan and Linda were still missing and the Coast Guard scouring the Atlantic, investigators back on land began searching through their vehicles here at this marina, looking for clues that might help in the search.
It looked like he had been somewhat almost living out of his truck or sleeping in his truck. We found some receipts from different marine stores.
Items purchased at area marinas in the hours before the fateful voyage included a rock-type anchor that would never have worked for Nathan's boat, and then some lengths of chain. They were curious purchases.
But there was also a bucket of eels that was in Nathan's truck. That stood out to me because eels are often used as bait when fishing for striped bass. And if you left the dock and didn't take your bait, what are you using for bait if you're going fishing?
Nathan tells us the same story he told police, that his mom had been concerned about safety ahead of the boat trip.
And I want to stress that it wasn't an argument, because I want to stress that it was not an argument. She had always been kind of skittish. We're stopping right here with that question.
Oh, okay. But why not reach out for help? The Coast Guard said there was no Mayday call.
They had a radio, and there was also an EPIRB, which is an emergency position indicating radio beacon, on the boat, like someone needs to be medevaced, or when you know you're sinking. But I didn't know that we were sinking until we sank.
Nathan said that there was a lot of commotion going on and the water was being taken on in here. So where would his mom have been when all of this is happening?
Right where you are.
So she would have been right back in this area?
Yes.
But they're not speaking? I mean, and she doesn't know that they're going down?
Nathan has excellent line of sight on her the whole time, and yet he says he never saw her afterwards.
At that point, I didn't know if she had been dragged down with the ship, because neither of us had been wearing life vests. I assumed that if she had been on the surface, that she would have been calling out to me and I would have been able to find her.
According to Nathan, days go by and he huddles on the life raft, keeping a lookout for rescuers.
I was looking out at the horizon for other ships or for helicopters when conditions were good. When the waves were high, because they got to like 13 feet and they were breaking waves at a few points, a few days.
That must have been terrifying.
Yes.
But to some, Nathan's claim of drifting for over a week in rough seas before being rescued defies belief.
The initial videos showing this guy walking up the gangway of the ship without any great problem. He seemed to be just fine.
You would be in dire straits after, 5 or 6 days.
If
you laid on that couch for 8 days and you got up to go to the bathroom, your legs would be wobbly because you haven't used them.
At the same time that Nathan and Linda's vehicles were searched at the docks, police in Vermont were conducting a search of Nathan's house, which was under construction.
The investigators find, modems, SIM cards, a few other things. The one thing they don't find is a computer. Whatever computer he was using to conduct his online purchases has disappeared.
Another item that was seized during the search was a lengthy letter that Nathan had written to an unknown priest that described his relationship and his view of his mother.
My mother's bullying, calling me a quitter, a stuck-up snob who thinks he is a king, and a piece of basically characterized my childhood. One night, though, I went to bed imagining myself as essentially a master of my own hell, joying in inflicting grave bodily suffering on other people. So, yeah.
After his interview with Alfred Bucco, Nathan has all but stopped talking to the police and is never questioned about the letter or his missing computer. Reporter Lindsay Janis is one of the few people he is willing to talk to.
I know I wasn't responsible for anything that resulted from the boat sinking. I know I wasn't responsible for my mom's death.
You were convinced that Nathan had killed his grandfather.
Correct.
And now you're convinced that he killed his own mother?
Yes.
That's pretty dark stuff.
If the interview hadn't already made Nathan's story seem a little fishy, the follow-up was even more eye-opening.
I did not cause my mother's death. We're done here this evening.
If you have nothing to hide, there shouldn't be a problem answering the questions.
Oh, Dave.
Oh, hi, Dave. Nice to meet you. Hi, how are you?
I'm Matt. Nice
hi,
to meet you.
Matt, nice to meet you, Matt. Thanks so much for taking us out. Initially, when everybody else was scratching their heads and wondering, wow, this poor guy, what happened to his mom? For the average person out there who's looking at this and taking it at face value, folks who know the water, like you do, had your doubts.
Absolutely. People had doubts about this story from the beginning.
With Linda Carmen presumed lost at sea, her reportedly tumultuous relationship with her son Nathan was under renewed scrutiny. He sits down with 2020 for a second interview, which now holds new significance.
If someone said that you did not get along with your mother, that you did not like her, is there any truth to that at all?
No, there's not any truth to that. Our relationship had grown from where it had been. We did have a challenging relationship at one point in my life, but she was the closest person in the world to me after my grandfather passed.
Will you inherit all of what your mother had?
That's something that I can't comment on at this time.
But unbeknownst to Nathan, his mom has decided not to leave him any inheritance. She even records a video message obtained exclusively by 2020 explaining that he won't be getting her house.
Hey, big guy, I guess if you're watching this, you're watching this. I want to explain why I did what I did and why my will is stated the way it is. I feel that when you moved out, you took everything that was of value to you and everything you wanted. That's my feeling.
And in her written last will and testament, dated 3 years before she disappeared, Linda explicitly excludes Nathan as a beneficiary.
By now, more details of John Chocolos's death and the subsequent investigation have risen to the surface.
Initially, the media was unaware that Nathan's grandfather, John Chocolos, had been shot to death in his bed 3 years prior to the disappearance of Linda Carmen. And once those connections were made, the story amplified. It wasn't a bittersweet rescue story anymore. It was something potentially much more devious.
So, at what point in your life would you say that you became really close with your grandfather?
Here's where I have a bit of an issue. My understanding was we were going to be sitting down and we were going to be talking about
Yeah, the raft is
survival
my
at
next
sea.
bit, but we did explain that we need to hear about your whole life leading up to this
That's
incident.
Something I.
How can people know who Nathan is if we don't tell them? What was your relationship like with your grandfather?
I'm not talking about my relationship with my grandfather or with. If you want to ask me any more questions on that line, we're done here.
Can you tell me more about what your grandfather did? He was a big figure in this part of the country.
That's not what this interview is about.
He gets really defensive if people pry a little bit too much. And the way that he shut her off on so many questions and wouldn't cooperate, he was shooting himself in the foot on national TV.
Since we spoke a week ago, there's been a lot of speculation. People are suspicious of you. What do you want to say to those people who are saying something about his story that just isn't adding up?
I'm not aware that those people exist.
There are suspicions about the boat trip. Since we last got together a week ago,
I've said the way it happened.
I'm just asking you to defend yourself against these people who are saying that you did something to your boat that would make it sink.
That's not true.
Nathan had never been interviewed at length by a network or by a reporter, so this was something new to Nathan, and I think Nathan thought it was going to go one way when it certainly went another way.
Was there an issue with the boat that needed to be fixed?
No, there were. We're done.
Nathan, I'm trying to give you an opportunity to speak out against these allegations that have been made.
The only way that I can speak out against them is to say what actually happened, and that's what I've been trying to do.
Another thing that's happened since we last got together, police searched your mom's home.
Yeah,
Did you know anything about that?
We're done for this evening, period. We're done
We're
here.
not trying to make you uncomfortable. We're trying to give you an opportunity to answer some of these allegations.
We're done here this evening.
If you have nothing to hide, there shouldn't be a problem answering the questions.
He walked out. He walked out of the interview, only to come back.
Police never arrested you for the murder of your grandfather. Do you think it is unfair that people are bringing that up and talking about that now?
It is absolutely unfair for the police to use the tragedy that happened to my mother and I as an opportunity to try to nail me for a murder that I didn't commit.
Can you understand when people see that you were the last person to see two people alive? They see that and they say you are either the most unlucky man alive or you had something to do with those two deaths. What do you say to that?
I say that there's no relationship.
Later that month, Nathan holds a memorial service for his mom. It's sparsely attended by some of her friends. Linda's sisters are notably absent.
Now, Linda hasn't even been declared dead yet. Nobody in his family is willing to go because many of us in his family believe that Nathan is truly the culprit.
I'm very grateful to the friends and family who attended in memory of my mom.
Nathan, you've been through so much. How have you been these last several weeks?
It's been very difficult.
We had no boat. We had no body. But as in any investigation, there's always evidence that can be recovered. It's just a matter of making sure that you know where to look.
It's all hands on deck at that point to try to uncover the truth.
As with the death of John Chocolos, according to investigators, there isn't enough evidence to charge Nathan with a crime. But in a twist of fate, a seemingly innocuous insurance claim for the sunken boat is about to take the saga of Nathan Carman in an unexpected direction.
Some of these strange occurrences maybe could be chalked up to an inexperienced fisherman, a guy who's panicking.
You know, I spent a lot of time with Nathan. I think he was cold, calculating, and had this whole story planned out to explain the disappearance of his mother and the sinking of the vessel.
The idea that he drifted for a week in that life raft just didn't hold water for you?
Not even for a second.
The Nathan Carmen case was incredibly explosive. A young man is plucked out of the ocean. That just conjures up all of these images of, say, Tom Hanks in Castaway.
Author Casey Sherman has spent the last 2.5 years researching the case for his new book, Blood in the Water.
The story is so complex and it has so many layers to it. Not only do you have one potential murder, but it's the story about a family and how wealth can corrupt.
As investigators continue digging into Nathan Carmen's story of being lost at sea, he takes action, filing an insurance claim for $85,000 to recoup the loss of his boat, the chickenpox.
It happened very promptly, and that indicated to me that this guy's really serious.
The insurance company is not going to pay Nathan. In fact, they are going to take Nathan to court. Nathan also didn't back down.
We filed our suit to deny insurance coverage. We were in for a fight. We came away with the distinct impression that almost everything he said to us was a lie. There were holes in every aspect of his story.
Holes in his story and his boat. Here at this marina where Nathan's odyssey began, fellow boaters noticed odd behavior in him the day before that fateful trip.
It kind of caught my eye when I saw him leaning over the back and drilling 2 holes in the transom of the boat. I asked him, "What are you doing?" That's why he told me, he says, he's taking the trim tabs off.
Trim tabs are stabilization devices that help lift the boat up higher on the water. Nathan admits to removing them, leaving holes in his boat, but says he patched them up with a marine putty.
I patched the holes. They seemed to be well patched. And at the time my mom and I went out, I felt that one, I knew those holes were above the water line, and 2, I felt that they were securely patched.
The idea that he was patching up those holes, that putty, the patching didn't work?
It wouldn't work. My theory is that he was trying to make it look like he was deliberately altering the boat in a dangerous fashion.
So that maybe it looked like he made a mistake.
He's very calculating. He wanted people to be able to point to, oh, no wonder the boat sank.
Attorney Dave Farrell represented Nathan's boat insurance companies and has looked into Nathan's account of what happened for years. Nathan's story is that his boat started taking on water, but he failed to put out a distress call because he didn't think the boat was sinking. One would think then maybe he would call out for help, the Mayday situation, right? Did he do that?
No, and he had ample opportunity, because each of the times that he went into the wheelhouse to carry gear forward, he was within arm's length of the microphone for his VHF radio, and a good one.
This is where the emergency equipment is, right? Here?
Yeah, right here. A microphone within arm's reach. And he came in here 3 times to get survival gear and bring it up to the bow. So he was within arm's length 3 times he could have picked it up.
All of these things sound pretty odd. Maybe you can chalk them up to panic, an inexperienced fisherman, but you would have to have hard evidence to really show that he wasn't where he should have been.
I got an oceanographer to assess whether it was possible for him to drift in a life raft to where the Orient Lucky picked him up 7 days later.
And was it?
Absolutely impossible. Physically impossible.
I looked at drifting buoys, I looked at historical data, I looked at thermal images of the Gulf Stream rings. All of these different systems showed the currents going westward, and Nathan claimed he drifted eastward. And that did not make any sense.
And Nathan's aunts aren't buying his alleged fish tales either.
New twist in a story making national headlines involving Nathan Carmen.
They file what is known as a Slayer petition, which prevents a person from inheriting property from someone they murdered.
Nathan Carmen's aunts do not want him to inherit that money, and they say essentially profit off of 2 deaths they believe he caused.
When Nathan walks into court, he's actually got a suit, and he's cleaned up, he's shaven.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Nathan Carmen appearing on my own behalf.
He looks like a young, aspiring law student.
The loss of my mom has been extremely difficult for me, so I can sympathize with petitioners in that respect.
He ended up taking depositions. He ended up going into court and arguing motions.
I'll say that some of the petitioners had awfully substantial motive, and I had very, very little.
He ended up putting up his own defense.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole. But in this deposition obtained by 2020, it's Nathan in the hot seat.
This is the deposition of Nathan Carmen.
Did you have a close relationship with your mother, Linda Carmen?
I would say that I did, yes.
When asked to respond to claims that he lied to police during their interviews with him in 2013, Nathan clams up.
How often did you lie to the Windsor Police Department?
There was one inaccurate. I'm pleading the fifth.
Pleading the fifth as to lying to the Windsor Police Department after your grandfather is dead.
That's
Is that
what
correct?
he said.
Okay.
Nathan pleads the fifth 81 times during this deposition.
I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. And I plead the fifth.
Meaning he declines to answer questions to avoid potentially incriminating himself.
I plead the fifth.
That's damaging to Nathan, I think, in the public's mind. Who takes the fifth? You know, mobsters take the fifth. Gang lords take the fifth. Not somebody that's completely innocent.
Nathan Carmen caught a legal break today after a judge tossed out the lawsuit his aunts had filed to keep him from collecting millions of dollars from his grandfather's estate.
The judge dismisses the case after he rules John Chocolos wasn't a resident of New Hampshire.
The newspapers reported it as a tremendous win for Nathan. I wasn't too troubled by it.
Nathan is off the hook for his family lawsuit, but his insurance case is looming, and investigators have him in their sight.
Pieces of the puzzle had started to come together.
There were too many inconsistencies.
There's no such thing as a perfect crime.
Nathan Carmen and his insurer head to court in Providence, Rhode Island, battling it out in what would be Nathan's biggest legal challenge yet.
Was Nathan at fault for the sinking of his boat, or was he owed a payday?
Nathan Carmen and his lawyer saying absolutely nothing, heading to Providence Federal Court this morning for the first day of the civil trial against Carmen.
He's got everything to lose here. If the court determines that he is negligent in his mother's death, that can open up the potential for criminal charges. Nathan at times was very agitated during the trial, but he was also very active, always leaning over and having conversations with his attorney. And he was right in the thick of things.
He takes the stand, sticking to his story of what happened on that boat. What was he like on the stand?
He is very articulate when he wants to be, very exacting, but also very evasive.
Nathan had no emotion when he testified. That may be because he is on the autism spectrum. And he talked about his mother in a way that she was more of a nuisance than she was a help to him while that boat was going down.
The judge asked him, "What's going on with your mother during all this time?" And Nathan's peculiar answer was, "My mother was part of the problem rather than the solution to a sinking boat."
With the case now in the judge's hands, Nathan talks to the media outside the courthouse.
This isn't about money. It's an $85,000 claim. I almost feel like I have a responsibility to my mom to make sure that the truth comes out.
At the end of the trial, the judge rules that Nathan was negligent with regard to the sinking of the chicken pox.
That was a small victory for me because at least a little bit of justice was prevailing through it all.
The civil case acted as the de facto criminal case. FBI investigators, Coast Guard investigators, attorneys, prosecutors, they all had front row seats.
Now it transitioned to his house in Vermont.
Pieces of the puzzle had started to come together and had started to paint a picture for us that this was in fact a criminal act.
There were too many inconsistencies. There were too many things that just didn't add up.
It became very, very clear that Nathan had committed a crime on the high seas.
We don't have a body, we don't have a boat, so it's a very, very difficult case to try to prove. The grand jurors have to decide, is there enough evidence to proceed and indict?
It took several years, but Nathan Carmen is now charged with killing his mother.
Nathan agrees to meet with investigators, but has no clue what's about to happen.
Nathan was surprised when he was advised that he was under arrest for the murder of Linda Carmen.
It was like something out of the golden age of piracy. Nathan was charged with murder on the high seas.
According to an indictment, Carmen devised a scheme to defraud his grandfather's estate and to obtain money from the trust, and the murders were part of this scheme.
However, the indictment doesn't charge Nathan with the murder of John Chocolos.
Medical records, school records.
Nathan hires defense attorney Marty Manella.
Marty Manella is a long-time, very bulldogged litigator, and when he met Nathan, he not only found a client, but he found a son.
He had literally no support. That was probably the hardest thing that Nathan had to endure, the fact that he had no one. But he had us. He really had us. And I had never, in 50 years of practicing law, had that kind of relationship with a client. Never.
As he's escorted into federal court for arraignment, cameras catch Nathan defiantly proclaiming his innocence.
Not guilty.
Before pleading not guilty to the court as well.
During Nathan's detention hearing, his aunts read a letter to the judge saying that if you let him go, they would be in fear for their life.
I was very relieved that Nathan was going to be put behind bars. If Nathan was not arrested and not contained, I really think he would have gone on a murder spree.
For years, Nathan had lived in solitude in Vermont. He had never threatened anyone. So to me, it was unusual that they were in fear of what?
The court sides with his aunts and denies Nathan's bail, setting a trial date for October 2nd, 2023. Marty and his team get to work.
It was a huge undertaking, and it was a daily, 7-day-a-week thing. It really became part of our lives.
Nathan was incredibly active in his defense. Every waking hour when he wasn't in his jail cell, he was at the prison library, poring over legal books.
This case was his whole life. He wanted his day in court. He wanted to clear his name.
The day of June 15th, 2023, came as a shock. They were just a few months away from trial.
We've learned Nathan Carmen has died while awaiting a trial for his mother's death.
I got a call in the morning. Nathan was gone, and he hung himself. And I just cried.
Nathan took his own life. He wasn't depressed. He wasn't despondent. We were all looking forward to that October date so that we could have this trial.
Despite all the family court battles and accusations,
Nathan's aunts come to pay their respects at his funeral.
I attended Nathan's funeral. Myself and my sisters were there. I was very sad.
Nathan's attorney paid for the funeral, paid for his cremation, and then gave his eulogy.
Non-violent and loving young man. Sleep with the angels, my dear friend. It was probably the toughest thing I ever did because it was like losing a family member. May sound crazy. You lose cases, you lose clients, but you don't have that kind of contact that we had with this person.
I think he is both a victim and a villain in his own story. Nathan Carman remains an enigma.
The criminal charges against Nathan were dismissed. So in the eyes of the law, Nathan is an innocent man still today.
Months after Nathan Carman's funeral, a Connecticut judge officially declares his mom, Linda, deceased 7 years after she disappeared at sea. The Windsor Police Department tells 2020 that John Chocolos's murder case is still active.
What I'd like people to remember about my dad, he was kind, he was loving. He'd give you a hard time, but he always did it out of love. Linda was so kind and generous to her friends and the people around her. And I remember all the good times that Linda and I had.
What do you want people to know and remember about your uncle, John?
He's a guy that did it himself. I mean, I loved that guy, you know, and he loved me.
How much do you miss him all these years later?
Every day. Yep. We went to the cemetery today. Nathan's got a stone there, next to my uncle. Why is he buried there? There's no stone there for my cousin Linda. Where's her stone?
Nathan should be remembered as a troubled soul. I'm happy, I'm relieved that Nathan was buried in the family plot next to my dad. Nathan, the child, belongs where he is. He needs to rest.
That's our program for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm Deborah Roberts.
And I'm David Muir from all of us here at 2020 and ABC News. Good night.